it's Shenuka, and I've been a K-pop fan for many years now. And I've actually done one of these dance rotoscopes before, so you can check it out on this very channel. So people wanted to see a more step-by-step version of this. So here we go. Even if you aren't a K-pop fan, rotoscoping animation is a pretty useful technique, and you can follow along with this tutorial step by step, even if you have very little drawing experience. And sometimes, even if you can draw, rotoscoping can be useful to achieve complex movements like dance. One of the things that got me through 2020 was Stray Kids, particularly Felix, and the music video for Thunderous begins with this really cool animated sequence, the style of which I decided to emulate. So I made this quick concept art based on two poses from the segment that I had selected. I'm sticking to a limited color palette to make sure it's simple enough for me to animate in not too many layers, while also sticking to the style. I had my clip ready, making sure that the video is at a frame rate of 24 frames per second, which is the default for Blender. It's important that this matches up. I'm starting off with a blank 2D animation project in Blender, and I'm creating a plane. I'm rotating and scaling it to fit my camera view exactly. Now in shading mode, I'm going to edit the material of the plane. I'm deleting this principled VSDF node and replacing it with an image texture. And I'm plugging my video file into this. I'm going to tick auto refresh to make sure it keeps refreshing the frame, and I'm adding the number of frames of the video that I wanted to play for me. And now when I hit play on my timeline, the video plays. The camera in the video isn't steady and it zooms in and out a little bit. So I'm fixing this by switching to the dope sheet and animating the plane to move backwards and forwards by setting keyframes by location so that he remains roughly the same size from the camera view throughout. This step isn't entirely necessary, it depends on your video, so do it if you think you need it. Now I'm switching to the grease pencil object and timeline to start my drawing. I'm deleting all the default materials since I prefer to start with new ones. What I'm making now is a plain white material that I can use as a partially see-through canvas, so I can draw on it while also seeing the video underneath. I'm drawing it on with the rectangle tool, lowering its opacity a little bit. And now I can start tracing over the frames one by one. I'm starting my animation at this point where he jumps down to make it kind of dramatic. Now you could draw over each and every frame, but I usually find this can be kind of jittery and way too time consuming, so I'm going over them selectively, usually leaving a gap of 2 to 3 frames. I'm making sure that I have a new frame at the start of each new action. The hair I have stylized a little bit, so I'm animating it from my imagination instead of relying on tracing the footage. I've also added smears, like what I've got with the hands here, where things are moving kind of fast. On the timeline here, I've mapped out on which poses I'd like each new frame to be. And I'm drawing them all one by one, adding smears where necessary. You can see the timing and spacing on the rotoscope in comparison to the video here. And here's what it looks like without the video. Then I went in and added a few more frames in to smoothen out some of the movements that I thought needed it. As you can see, I've switched on the onion skins here. Then going back to the concept art I created, I made a color palette of the materials that I would need. I've also made a set of layers that will carry each different color block on the character. And I've locked all the layers that I'm not working in right now to make sure that I don't accidentally edit any of them. I'm starting with a layer for the red elements, just outlining each of those shapes. Then moving on to the black, then the hair in the bright blue, and then with the black and blue stroke materials, I'm adding some outlines and creases to separate and define the shapes a bit more. I'm changing the world color to the same black to match my concept art. And now I have an idea of the entire process that needs to be done for each of the frames. Remembering to add those smears. I'm also animating the hair frame by frame as I go based on my intuition, adding a little bit of drag and follow through as I go. Adding those defining outlines. This process takes ages and is very repetitive, so make sure you have a good playlist or like a podcast going. Also make sure you're realistic about the number of seconds of animation that you can commit to. And here's how it's all built up. First the red blocks, adding on the black, animating the hair, the black lines, and finally the blue lines. And now it's time to add the eyes. I've smeared them here, which makes for a pretty cool effect when the animation is played back as if the eyes are glowing. Adding them in frame by frame. I'm also going to add some electric blue motion lines at some points. I'm drawing them in to follow the arcs of the motions of the arms. This works best when added to the really fast and deliberate kinds of movement. Now, one of the features that animation has that live action doesn't is squash and stretch. It can help exaggerate and enhance animation and give it character, which is something that rotoscoping can tend to lack. So I'm going to add a little bit of that to this animation. I'm unlocking all of my layers and switching to the sculpt tool, and I'm using it to exaggerate the stretch on that first frame. I'm also exaggerating the squash on the landing pose, really pushing the limits here, but I swear it'll look cool. See? It's actually a lot more subtle than you'd think, but it really adds to the effect. I'm also adding some of that to the final jump as well. And here's a final animation. Huge thanks to Sketchfab for sponsoring the video. Sketchfab is a really cool site with a huge library of 3D models and assets that is accessible to everyone. And not just that, it allows you to upload, buy and sell all kinds of 3D assets easily. So if you're a regular Blender user, this is super useful as a resource. So don't forget to check out Sketchfab for all your 3D model needs with our link down in the description. So here's a huge thank you to all our patrons on Patreon. Their names up on the screen right now. If you want, you can go support us on Patreon. And we also have a Discord, so you can join that if you want to hang out with us and other creatives. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more of our work. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.